yeah, this is going to serve the core metrics going internationally?
Ooh, that's a great question.
If you would have had 3 countries that you guys dominated instead of 30 countries, would you have been better off? Welcome to Hello Grow.
The number one growth podcast.
I'm Court Brady,
I'm Carlos Souza.
and today we have Travis Miller. Thanks for joining us, Travis.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Your introduction is going to blow people away, so I'm going to jump right into it. You have worked for Young Living and Amari, and you've launched products and built teams in Latin America. You lived in Ecuador. You lived in Colombia. You helped launch Canada, were the manager there. And you were the regional president of the Americas, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, which is like, you could just shorten it to global president for the like. It's amazing what you've done. You've launched products in all these different places. I think you mentioned Turkey when we were just talking.
Yep.
I'm super stoked. We're going to talk about if a business is going to go international, what things they should look out first before they go international, what research they should do before launching a product, and then what first 100 days looks like in a new country, how to build the team out, how to deal with legal issues, with cultural differences, with the language barriers, all those things. A couple other things to introduce you by. You have an undergrad in business. You have an MBA from Westminster. And you're also my next door neighbor.
That's right.
So such a
That's
treat
the best of it all.
to get to live next to you. That's a feather in my hat, not in yours. And incredible pickleball player, spike ball championship. And right now you are on a 6-month sabbatical. And before we jump in, I just want to talk a little bit about that. Like you're a month into what everyone's dream is to have a couple kids that are in Little League, a beautiful wife, and just have 6 months off during the summertime in beautiful Salt Lake City. Like, what does a day in the life look like for you?
Oh, it's quite nice. It's quite nice. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I wake up, I make my kids breakfast, I water my plants, I feed my chickens that are in the backyard right now.
Oh, that sounds like the dream.
And then, sit in the back patio with my wife and kids and kind of just take it easy. But obviously that's not the plan for the full 6 months. But that's how it is right now. My son just finished baseball. He plays for a local team here, and it was exciting. It was fun. I was able to finish coaching or help coaching on his team, and we're planning to have a good summer. But get back to work real soon after we, I don't want the full 6 months of doing nothing. I got some things up my sleeve that I'd like to launch while I'm on the sabbatical and work on. So, it's been nice. But after July, it'll have to kind of change a little bit.
Are we going to be able to hear any of these things up your sleeve, or they're still in the incognito mode?
No, there's definitely one that I can definitely share. I don't know if you want me to share it now or later.
Yeah, what are you working on?
So we have a children's book that we just finished up, that we just illustrated and just finished the editing and everything, that we're going to be launching shortly. And basically what it does, it brings awareness to critically endangered species, or species, however you want to say it. And the first one is about the California condor. So it's a children's book with a nice story that kind of relates them with the condor and what the importance of the condor is in our environment, and how we can help our environment to protect the condors. So it's really cool.
That's sweet.
We've got it printed. We've got 10 books printed right now. So I'll share one with you.
Would love to read it
when we get home, and
our kids will love it.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. So that's one thing that we're launching. So in this sabbatical that I'm on right now, that's one thing we're focusing on. And hopefully some other things up the sleeve that will be coming out shortly.
Writing books, feeding chickens, hanging out with your wife, little league baseball. That's amazing.
Can I ask you why because I've shared with a few people that's a dream of mine. When I hit 30, I want to go on a sabbatical. Why did you do it? Why are you doing it?
So it was just time to kind of take some time to change up what I want to do in life. I've had a pretty good career the last 10 to 15 years, building markets, building teams internationally. And I want to take a pause and see if I can launch some things of my own during this time, and then see if I can get those to be successful and continue being the entrepreneur that I would love to be, and or go back to the, to work, get my job and get back to the work, get back to work, and
So this is 6 months of a playground, a little sand pit for you. What do they call it? A
Sandbox.
sandbox.
Sandbox. Yeah.
There's a
Six months
sandbox
of a
for you.
sandbox, which is
Just build some
very
stuff.
nice,
See what
yes.
sticks.
Sounds amazing.
See what you love.
But I know building things takes longer than 6 months, but at least we can get something started and see what we could do with that, and then, see where it goes from there.
Awesome. Well, I want to jump into first 100 days was Ecuador your first?
Oh yeah,
Wait,
Ecuador was my first international
So
assignment.
as we go into this, I want to hear, knowing what you know now, what would your first 100 days look like, and what your first 100 days actually looked like when you went to
Okay.
Ecuador for the first time, like the mistakes you made and why you would do things
That's a
differently.
great question. Actually, I really enjoyed my first 100 days in Ecuador. The reason the company sent me down there is because it was a market that had been open for several years and wasn't having the success that it needed. So it was kind of like their last effort to turn the market around and have some success and make it
It's such a
profitable.
small market though, right?
Such
How
a
many
small market,
people,
but-
less people in Ecuador than Utah?
About the same.
Couple million?
I don't know. We'll have to look that one up.
But such a small country.
It's a small country, a beautiful country, but a small country. So the reason there were ties that the company had to Ecuador, and that's the reason that they were there. They had a farm there where they produced a lot of the different essential oils for their market, for their company in that market. So there was an emotional tie there. There was tied to the ownership. And so that's one of the main reasons. But actually, surprisingly enough, Ecuador is a great market for direct sales, which is the industry for Young Living and many other companies.
What makes it
out
a
there.
great market for direct sales?
So just looking at the statistics of markets that are good for direct sales, Ecuador actually ranks top 5, I believe, in Latin America. So typically number 1 is Mexico or Brazil. And then Colombia's in there, and Ecuador's up there as well. So those are the typical markets that do well in direct sales in Latin America.
And over your 18 months there, were you able to turn it around, or did it stay like?
Yeah.
What was the story?
So my first 100 days, right? So I got down there, and the company at the time was running out of a house that was an old house of the owners that used to live there years ago, and so it wasn't the most ideal location to run the business. And then there was no there's no physical location or office space. It was this house, and it was in a nice area, but it wasn't where there was a lot of traffic. So the first thing that I did when I got down there, I said, we need to make sure that the brand is known in Ecuador, that people know who we are. And the way I did that is I moved us out of that house, got into a new office, and we opened up what we called an experience center in the most popular mall in Guayaquil. And we were right across the way from Aldo Shoes. So it's like we were in this premier area and good location, and people started to know who we were. So that was one of the big things that we did there. So the first 100 days, I think that we did a pretty good job, but there are some things that I would change now. And the number one thing would be make decisions quicker.
Interesting. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I had to... One of the things that I did is I had to make a change with my sales manager down there. And I think it was something that was needed, but it was hard because this person was close to me and kind of took me under his wing and taught me everything about Guayaquil, what it takes to be a guayaco, and taught me a lot about the culture and everything like that. But he wasn't the right person for the job to take us to the next level or to where we needed to go. And so I dragged out that decision for a lot longer than I should have. And had I made that decision sooner, then I think it would have been a lot better for the company. Just getting the right people on the bus, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we talk about. Get the right people on the bus. Make sure that you have the right team, the correct team. And a lot of times when you're going in and making some hard decisions, you need to make sure that you have those right people on the bus to get you to the vision of where you want to go.
What is it that kept you from making that decision? Was it like, man, I'm just like nervousness of like, I don't know what is going to happen, but then you, looking back, you thought, man, I could have made that decision sooner because I would have figured it out? Or like what?
Honestly,
what do you think kept you?
That was a hard one because he was a friend. Yeah, so that was it.
Were you hopeful that it would ever work out? Did you just keep telling yourself that story?
Yeah, I wanted him to be the person that was there, because he was a friend of mine that I made. He wasn't a friend of mine before I went down there, but he was quickly the one that took me under his wing and showed me everything and got me to know the culture, and it helped me get to know the culture, the people, the soccer team. He took me to a soccer match. So he was really a friend of mine, one of my only friends down there. And that's what was so hard to make the decision, because I was letting a friend go, probably the closest friend that I had in Ecuador. But it was the right decision, needed to be made, because once I did that, and once that was in line with other decisions that we made, like opening up the experience center and changing offices and doing bigger events and stuff like that, we took off. And to answer your question, we were able to turn things around within those 18 months that I was there. And when I left, by the time I left, Ecuador was profitable by the time I left. So running on its own, which was very exciting, because it hadn't had any profitability in those previous years.
So cool. And how long were you there for?
18 months ish.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quick.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason it was so fast is because they opened up Colombia, which was a new market launch. And they had a general manager for Colombia. It didn't work out for them. So then they came to me and said, hey, can you take on Colombia? So I took Colombia.
Okay, so how do you wrap up Ecuador to make sure this growth and profitability that you've built is going to be sustainable? And then what does your first 100 days in Colombia look like doing it, having done it 18 months prior?
Okay. Yeah, it's a great question. I would say the way you wrap it up is you make sure that the success doesn't depend on you.
How do you do that?
You build a good team around you.
That's like everyone is trying to find the answer to that question.
You build a team and a culture around you that continues on without you. So my marketing manager down there was incredible. I could rely on her for pretty much anything I needed to get done. I brought in a good sales manager. We had a good ops manager. We had a good finance manager. My finance manager down there was incredible. And he wasn't only a finance manager, but also knew the business very well and supported the sales initiatives that we had. So that team that I was able to build around there, when I left, I was fully confident that when I left, they could continue the work that we established.
Okay, so walk me through the tactics. Like, I feel like that answer, while true, everyone is wondering, like, please give us the secret sauce of what you act like. Is there an Indeed in Ecuador that you search these people on? Is it like a LinkedIn networking? Did you fly them in from the U.S.? Did they walk into your experience center? Did you go to church and find, like,
No.
How did you go about finding these 5 people?
Honestly, so of the 5 people, I only brought in 1 new person. So the other 4 were already there.
Oh.
So the talent was there already. It was just empowering them to do their job and trusting in them to do.
So you leveled up the team to get to profitability.
But a lot of these people that were down there were not empowered to, or weren't fully empowered to do their job to the capacity that they could do it. So that's one of my biggest things that I try to do, is empowering others and trusting in them that they can do their job. And if they fail me, okay, then I'm kind of at fault at that. I trust people until I can't, where other people, you need to gain that trust before you trust them. And I'm kind of the other way around. I trust people until you prove to me that you can't, which might not be the best in other circumstances, but for me, it's worked up to now.
I think it's a great thing. I've seen that. I've seen you're like that. I've seen some people like that, and I think it's a superpower. I think when they're the right people, you run faster, right? Because you've trusted them since the beginning, and then you allow yourself to run faster. I have some questions about so when we started hiring people in Brazil a few years ago, we ran into a few issues where we always had a team in Utah, and as soon as we started hiring people in Brazil, we noticed that there were cultural differences in the way they operated, habits, and just they operated differently, and we had to create different processes to keep them in line.
Yeah.
Did you ever run into that, and how did you adjust culturally?
Yeah. Oh, culture is a huge thing. I mean, in Europe, they take the full month of July off or August, but that's what they do in Europe. Like, it's just different, and sometimes it's hard for us Americans to understand that business is different outside of the U.S. and we have to adapt to that culture.
So upset that tomorrow's a holiday. Please let me work.
But yeah, I definitely ran into those differences. I mean, I felt like in Ecuador, every month they had 3-4 different holidays that they took. I think,
Welcome to South America.
yeah, that's South America. That's right. So it's definitely just really understanding and knowing that you could still get the same job done, even with those cultural differences. Even with Europe taking a month off, you could still get the same job done by being efficient. And yeah.
You also mentioned something that it's fascinating. We interviewed someone here that said that we use this term A players, B players, C players, right? And then he said that he never fires people, and he has helped a lot of people move from C to A players, right? And you talked about leveling up the team. Can you share a couple of experiences being in a country that you're not very familiar with people that you haven't met? Can you share a couple of those experiences where you leveled up a couple of individuals, like the tactical and the practical things that happened?
That's a great question. I mean, just because we've been talking about Ecuador, it's like Ecuador's on my mind, but I'm sure I could find other examples in Canada and in Colombia and in Europe and other markets. But Ecuador's on my mind right now. So the one thing that comes to mind right now is the marketing manager down in Ecuador. She was capable of so much more than she was being allowed to do. And by just opening up that door and trusting her, she basically took that brand that we were looking for, that brand recognition, to another level. And that wasn't me. That was all her. And that was all trusting her because she knew what to do. She knew who to talk to. She knew the PR companies to talk with. She got us influencers at our events for free by just donating product when normally you have to pay for that. And so that's just one example in my mind, is just opening the door, letting them run, and trusting that they know what they're doing, and then proving to you that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then seeing the success of that.
I love that. Did that start with a conversation that you had with her? How did that? How did she feel like that you trusted her?
It started off with just seeing it in her, myself identifying that she was capable of much more, and just letting her run.
Awesome.
I've seen you do that over and over again. I think we find these people that have created this persona for themselves. I am this role, or I am capable of doing this. Then you say, hey, do you think you could do this task? Or, hey, we're thinking about doing this. And then you ask their opinion. It's like, I've never been able to offer my opinion before. And then you ask them, and then they have this idea, and they give their opinion. And then they say, and I think I could actually do it. Or I have like this connection. And then you have a new head of sales or a new head of marketing, whatever it is. It's like, man, you've had this potential inside of you. You just had to have somebody give you a chance.
Yeah.
But I think it takes, I've only been able to do that with other people because you did that with me. I remember I had been working at Aspen for about a year. And then I think I came to Court and I said, hey, I made a mistake and I just wasted $5,000. And then I think Court's response was, great, I'm glad you're making mistakes. And you said something about you paid tuition, so what did you learn from it? And that just that was all I needed to go and make more mistakes, but I also got a lot of things right. So I don't think we understand when we give people, when we trust people like you did, she probably went on to trust other people and build people like her, right?
For sure.
So it's just a snowball.
I think doing the numbers from last month, I think you made the business $300,000 in profit just from last month. So
yeah, so that
$5,000 mistake 2 years ago to $300,000 in profit a couple of years later. It's fast improvement. Talk to us about Colombia. You go into Colombia and you're the first boots on the ground, or there's somebody that wasn't working out after a couple of months that tell us that process.
So they did have a team that they established there when they launched the market.
Okay.
And a lot of times what we'll do to first establish a team in a market is we will use a recruiting firm to help us out. So they will have a list of people that they will say, okay, what do you need? You can sit down with them. You talk about what your needs are, what you're looking for, what positions, what kind of team you're building out. And then they'll go and help you find those people. And obviously you talk about the experience that you're looking for, and there's a lot of people out there with that experience. But when I went over to Colombia, that a team had already been established. So the only change was the GM. The GM was changed out, and then I came in and took over as the GM. So I already had my sales manager, marketing manager, ops manager, finance manager. That was already established. But again, Colombia was a market where it had very high expectations because Colombia typically is a very good market, and we just, after the launch, just didn't see the results that we were looking for, so they sent me over there to try to change it around. But when I got there, Colombia was a bit different because we were already in a great location with a great office, so it was mainly taking the strategies that we took as far as events and promotions and stuff we did there in Ecuador and kind of copying and pasting in Colombia. Because it worked in Ecuador, why wouldn't it work in Colombia? So we started doing like tours around Colombia, going to different cities, having events and stuff like that, and working with influencers again, and really building that brand awareness in the market because it was needed, because we were just new in the market and we needed to become known. So by doing that, we started to see success. We started to see revenue increase, and obviously we're spending for that revenue increase by doing these tours, but it paid off. And so within my time there, it was about another 18 months again. Well, this is the interesting story is in April 2020, we're supposed to move down there. So between Ecuador and Colombia, my family moved back to Utah for the summer, right? Or spring, I guess it would be. So we were going to move down the family to Colombia in April 2020. But in March 2020, everything collapsed and everything was shut down, and we ended up not moving to Colombia because of the pandemic. Oh. So I ended up running Colombia for the majority of my time from Utah, remotely. But up until April or March of 2020, that's when we were down there touring the country and doing all those events and stuff like that. And we saw good results. So because of that, they then offered me Canada, which was a much larger market, the number 4 market in the company at the time, with revenue of 70-80 million a year. So went up there, moved the family to Calgary, and started working up there.
So walk us through what's different in Canada. So much is different from Canada compared to Central and Latin America. What things were you able to just copy and paste? It's way harder to get around, I'm certain. To do, like, the tour of the country is going to take ages. What was your strategy? Was it a copy and paste from what you did in Ecuador and Colombia, or did you tweak things?
Yeah, I definitely needed to tweak things. It was different. Plus, it was during the pandemic, so we couldn't do the tours. So we had to do a lot of virtual events.
Did people attend those?
Yeah, people attended them. It was great. Obviously, people missed the in-person meetings and events that we would have, but we did the best with what we had, and we used all the different technology that we needed to put on a good event. And so it wasn't copy paste, not only because of the pandemic, but because it's a completely different culture. Latinos are very much in person, hugging. When you meet somebody in the Latin America country, you get the beso, you get the kiss.
They were over COVID in like two months because everyone just gave it to each other, and then they moved on with their lives.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So, but Canada, people are very warm and welcoming, and kind of similar, but definitely different culture. So you got to learn the differences there, and it was a much larger country, like you said. Doing a tour would take much longer, which we ended up finally doing after the pandemic, and we were able to travel and do tours.
You have a lot of regulation in Canada. I would assume that you don't have in Latin America. What was the regulation, and how did you get around it?
Yeah, so regulation as far as products.
There's products, but there's also selling regulation, like soliciting regulation. There's all those things, product and solicitation.
Yeah.
How'd you handle it?
So with my most recent company, I was in charge of registering and launching over 20 products in Canada. And yeah, like you said, it's a long process. You have to work with Health Canada, which is their regulatory authority up in Canada, which, a A lot of people love and hate Health Canada. The thing that's hard with Health Canada is, say you have a product in the US that you want to launch up in Canada. They'll have to do a complete formula review and see if there's any restricted ingredients in the formula. And if so, then you have to have an alternate ingredient or just completely take it out or whatever. So the formula could be different. The label could be different because it has to look different. The name could be different up in Canada. So we launched products up in Canada or throughout the globe, really, that was called something in the US that was called something different up in Canada, for example, because the regulatory agencies. So there's a lot of differences between doing business in the US and Canada and globally, especially when it comes to products and ingredients. And if you're working with Health Canada, then you have to make sure that you abide by all their different rules and different requirements to be able to do business up there.
Where did you source? Where'd you manufacture the product?
So most of the product manufactured here in the U.S. for the Canadians.
And in Ecuador, for Ecuador.
In Ecuador, it's kind of comes. So while I was in Ecuador, for their products, it's kind of sourced everywhere, but then produced in the U.S. and then shipped globally. But it's crazy because most of the time you'll have like a chief science officer or somebody over the formula that will put that together and source it from all over the world. And then typically that will be manufactured. All the ingredients will be shipped to one location, manufactured, and then shipped globally. But it depends. For example, with my last company, we just finished sourcing and producing the latest product that we just launched. I think they just launched it this month, July or June. Anyway, that was all produced locally.
So when you switched companies, and then that kind of opened Europe, Africa, Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah. So
tell us about that.
Yeah. So after my time in Canada, there was a new company that some people that I worked with went to that I was interested in working with. And the reason I was interested in working with them is because I worked with those people in the past. I was interested in the product that they were offering, and also obviously the opportunity. It was a new company that was just starting, smaller, and I was interested in growing with this company. So I decided to make the move from Canada and come back to Utah and take that job. And initially I took it as the vice president of international, so all international markets. At the time, the international markets for this company were in Mexico and Canada. That's it. But obviously we had plans to expand into Europe as well as other countries. And so that was...
So what worked and what didn't work as you guys started to expand into these other countries and continents?
Yeah, so Canada worked very well because Canada's an incredible market. And
you'd already been there and done that.
I've already been there, done that.
New product.
And so it was just new product, getting it registered, getting it up there. And Canada took off because they were just ready for the product that we had and ready for the opportunity. And whenever you're launching a new market, a lot of times companies will launch what's called a founder's pool, which is basically a profit share of the market each year. So we launched that in Canada. People were really excited about it, and that kind of got the momentum started.
And then Europe, Australia, New Zealand, tell us about those.
Yeah, so the way we got there, so you could either expand internationally by doing it organically and doing it yourself, or an acquisition. So what we did there is our CEO made the decision to acquire a company called Kyani. And we acquired that company that got us into 30 plus countries.
Wow.
Basically overnight with the infrastructure that provided. So that took us from 3 countries to 30 plus countries in one acquisition.
Okay, so when you're trying to manage, you're head of international and you're trying to manage 30 plus countries, it can't just be copy and paste because there's so much that's different. Do you have a head of each of those countries that all report to you? How does the structure work? How do you make sure that, do all of them have to be profitable, or are there loss leaders? Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, no. So the structure is typically you'll have a regional president in the U.S. that is part of the executive team, and that's kind of how we were structured. And then each country will have a general manager or a regional president of that country or area or whatever. So the way we initially set it up is we had general managers or regional vice presidents or whatever in these countries that reported to me, and then I was part of the executive team reporting up through the president of sales. So when we first acquired this company, we had a regional vice president in Europe that ran Europe and Turkey that I worked with that reported to me. A general manager in Mexico, general manager in Australia, New Zealand, general manager in Canada, and that's kind of the reporting structure that we had.
I see you home a lot. So how did you manage all of these people? Not like during the workday, but like at night, right? We're out talking over the fence. Like, how did you manage all of these people?
Yeah, it was insane, and it wasn't sustainable, if I'm being honest. It's too much because you would have to. I had basically every market but Asia, so I'd have to wake up early and have meetings with Europe. Then I'd work with the U.S. and Canada throughout the day, and then in the evenings I'd work with Australia and New Zealand. And the reason you saw me home is because I worked remotely, more of a hybrid environment. You know, we went in the office twice a week, so
sheesh,
it was tough. And like I said, it wasn't sustainable. So eventually, with growth, what you do is you start, empowering others to take on the regional president role. For example, what happened in Europe and Turkey is we promoted the regional president out there from regional vice president to regional president, and then they reported up through the president of sales.
Got it.
How involved do you get with you being here and having these general managers reporting to the continent manager reporting to you? How involved does corporate or you? How much do you get involved with the legal stuff for each country, or you outsource it to the general managers?
So the general manager should be the person that definitely knows the most about their country or their region. So we would rely heavily on that knowledge, but you also have your, in-house legal team that works with the legal teams in these countries to be able to make sure that you're doing everything correctly. So it's definitely a team effort. It's not just one or two people. It's 3, 4, 5 people that are working on this to make sure that it's done compliantly and correctly and legally in every different way.
Can I ask you a hard question?
A hard one?
Not that any of these haven't been hard. As I'm thinking about growing a company, there are metrics that are actually important, like profitability, cash flow, cash on hand. And then there are metrics that I like to talk about, but they're vanity metrics, like how many employees we have, we do a little bit of work in Mexico, but I love the fact that I get to say, we do work in Canada, the US, and Mexico. We do all of North America, and we've done work in Europe and Asia. From a business perspective, thinking about those core metrics, do you think it's wiser for businesses to double down on what they're doing in the countries that they're currently in and grow the company from we're already here, let's just do more of what we know? Or, this is going to serve the core metrics going internationally?
Ooh, that's a great question.
If you would have had 3 countries that you guys dominated instead of 30 countries, would you have been better off?
That's a really good question. And I think the answer to that would be, I think there is value in focusing on a smaller group of countries than spreading yourself too thin with 30 plus countries. Because what ends up happening is if you're in 30 plus countries, if a market's not doing well or not profitable for a certain amount of time, you have to give them an opportunity to turn things around and become profitable. But if not, then you're going to start closing countries because you need to be profitable to sustain your business. A lot of times what happens is the U.S. is typically, at least 60 to 80% of the business, of the revenue, a lot of the times.
60 to 80%.
And this is just me off the top of my head thinking, and it depends on how mature your business is, because sometimes what happens is the U.S. depends on the business. It'll be smaller than the Asia business or whatever, because Asia's huge and could be a huge successful business. But I would say the majority of companies start in the U.S. and that becomes the main business, and then they expand internationally. And if you spread yourself too thin, the U.S. will then have to supplement in the business in these other markets. So to answer your question, I think there is value in focusing on a few at a time and then expanding from there than spreading yourself too thin.
Carlos, I want to ask you the same question from a product perspective. We've had a lot of these conversations, and as you think about growth, specifically in Aspen, should we double down on what we're already doing as a room, and at what point do you say we're going to add on something new instead of getting even better and doing more of what we're already doing?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, and the way that Travis answered is perfect. I told you the experience, right? We were engaging in a few conversations. I'm gonna talk about the country first and then the markets. But we were in Brazil, and then we started engaging in conversations with a couple of insurance companies in Brazil, right? And then the level of effort to close one of those, let's say that one account would generate about $1 million a year in revenue. The time and the effort that was taken for us to close that, we could generate about 2-3 million here in the U.S. So we didn't have enough of a market share here to be able. We were not capped out. Like, there was still a market here for us to continue to harvest. So we just, okay, this is distracting us. Let's continue to explore here. Moving to a product.
Do you have a threshold of like when is enough market that you say, okay, we have 80% market share, we can only capture 20% more. That 20% is going to be tough. We're either going to go international through acquisition so not talking about internationally. We're either going to grow the business through launching a new internal product, or we're going to acquire somebody that has a product tangential but serves a new market that we can then grow.
That's such a hard question because it depends on the market you're in, right? Like if I'm competing with in the cloud space, for example, it all depends on your company goals and where you want to go. And if I'm competing in the cloud space, I'll probably be happy with 1% of the market, right? Because that's billions of dollars. In our case, we're a service business, and we didn't have a lot of competition. We don't have a lot of competition, so we want to go aggressive and at least have 50% of the market. So it all depends on how big the total addressable market is, the opportunity, the competition. You have to take a few things into consideration when it comes to market. But at the same time, product, it's the same thing. If you have a product, we've had people here on the podcast that they've go and start working on a new product and a new product and a new product, but they never even harvested enough from the first one that they launched, right? So I think it's a much harder question to answer, but it all depends on the total addressable market, the competition, and your goals as a business.
That's a great question. When do you expand? Like, when do you have enough? The thing is, there's so much opportunity in the U.S. and Canada that you can make a hugely successful business by just focusing on those two markets. But then are you missing out by not going into Mexico or Europe or Asia?
I think it's just so appealing. Such a vanity metric is the best way to say it, to say we're in these different countries or we offer all of these different products, but the 80-20 rule that 80% of our revenue is going to come from this one product or this one market, but probably 80% of your problems is coming from the 20% that you're in. Like that's how it is with us, right? Their smallest customers are always the ones that are most upset, want the most customization, like impossible to satisfy. And those that are bigger customers, we can dial in a process and they could be extremely satisfied.
So would you have less headache by just focusing on the big markets?
I think yes. I think it's just appealing, and it seems like a shortcut to just like the ignorance that we have around a new product or new market. We think, that's going to be so much easier just because we don't see all of the issues. But then once you get into it, it's like, oh no, this is just as difficult. It's going to take just as many hours and the same amount of people and same amount of resources to just grow our current thing.
I think a lot of people look at the world, the world population. There's 7 billion people out there, and there's only 300 million in the U.S., right? So people instantly think, oh, this is just 5% of the world's population. Why shouldn't I? But when you look at transactions and money spent, the U.S. is responsible for way more than 5%, right?
Yeah.
So there's so much money within U.S., Canada, that sometimes the opportunity is big enough for you to focus here.
I also think if you're an international company, coming to the U.S. is so much better for you because our dollar is so strong. Like when we went to Canada and we said what we wanted to charge them, and then we got all the way through the process, they're like, wait, this is in dollars, not Canadian dollars? Like, yeah, well, this is in dollars the whole time. Like, okay, we got to go back to procurement, do all this stuff. And same thing with Brazil. Like when you're talking about doing this in AIs instead of dollars,
6 to 1.
it's so much more difficult to make a profit there because your costs are honestly pretty close to the same. So if you're international, on the flip side, if you're international coming to the US, and you can say, man, I have all the labor, all the infrastructure, all of that, and I'm profitable in a country that has a dollar that's not as strong as the US dollar, or a currency not as strong, and you can come to sell to a US company, I think you could make a ton of money.
Was that an issue that you guys ran into?
Oh, absolutely.
Because on top of the exchange rate, you also have an extra tax to bring money back to the U.S., right?
Yep.
So you usually have to charge. I'd love to hear.
Plus the tariffs to bring the product into the country in the first place.
No, yeah. So you actually, that's definitely a challenge that we had most recently in Canada and Australia, New Zealand. Pricing of the product, like everyone expects it to be the same price as the U.S., but you can't
Right?
because of all the additional fees that you have to pay for launching and doing business in this international market. So the price of the product is going to be more expensive than it is in the U.S., and that's just how it is. So most recently, we had to establish the price for Canada products and for Australia, New Zealand, and there's always pushback. Always pushback.
From the consumer or from the corporate?
From the consumer. From the consumer.
And does that pushback say, like, I'm upset, but I'm still going to buy it, or I'm upset, so I'm going to go with an alternative?
And it's saying I'm upset because I want it to be the same price as the U.S., but I'm still going to buy it because I love your product.
Which is a good position to be in.
Yeah.
But how do you get to that point? How do you get that? How do you overcome? Like, do you start with low margins, thin margins, until you can get people's trust, or you just do really good work on marketing? How do you overcome that?
You have to make sure you have a healthy margin for the business right off the bat because it's so much harder to increase the price after you launch it, right? True. So you have to make sure you have a good margin from the get-go. Much easier to lower the price if you can in the future, which probably won't happen because prices always increase with inflation and everything. So I would say focus on having a healthy margin, but don't price yourself out of the market. And if you could find that and explain to the consumer why it is more expensive than it is here, and help them understand the reasoning, then in the industry that I'm in, we have what we call leaders in all the markets, which are more established distributors that we use to kind of bounce things off of and help understand what their market is looking for, or their teams or whatnot. So we'll have them a lot of times as a focus group, and we'll share with them some information about why things are this way or why the price is this, and so then they help us sell it. So if there's companies out there that have consumers that you can use as a focus group or as somebody who can advocate for your company or your product or the pricing as to why it is or whatnot, then I think that's always something that's valuable.
Travis, it's impossible to get your decades of knowledge in 45 minutes. I've loved this. I have one more question. Do you have any before?
Yes.
You do? You go first, then I'll ask mine.
This is more of a personal. Is yours more of a personal question as well?
Yep.
Okay, mine is. I think it's gonna kind of be similar to Court. This has been so insightful, and I'd love to hear, changing from a business to a personal perspective. What's the greatest advice? You are obviously successful and you've done a lot. What is the greatest advice you have ever received?
I guess I would answer it with one of my favorite quotes. And one of my favorite quotes is from John Maxwell. And it's, leaders become great not because of their power, but because of their ability to empower others. And I'm huge on empowerment and trying to help people become the best version of themselves. And the way to help them become the best version of themselves is by letting them run and letting them feel confident in that they can do what they need to do or what needs to be done, and empowering them to do the job that they need to get done. And I think that's where leaders emerge.
I love that.
I have 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
I know I said I had 1. First question is, what advice would you give to Travis in his 20s?
Oh, okay. Yes. The advice I would give myself in my 20s.
So are you, first, what version of Travis is going to hear this advice? 20-year-old, 25-year-old, 28-year-old?
I would say this is about a 25-year-old Travis.
Needs to hear this. Okay.
Yeah, about a 25-year-old Travis. And the advice I would give 25-year-old Travis would be to keep creating. The reason I say that is because when I was in my 20s, around 25, I started 2 different companies. I founded them and started growing them with some different friends and some different family members. One of them was called Chikupi, and that was a backyard chicken company. The reason we started this company is because there were the city ordinances that were starting to lift the ordinances of having backyard chickens. So basically what we did as Chikupi is we were your urban chicken outfitter. We gave you everything that you needed to be able to have your own backyard chickens, right? And the reason I would give myself this advice is because we did super well. We were featured in the Salt Lake City's Farmers Market. We were in the Salt Lake Tribune, Desert News. We had a Channel 5 exclusive. Like we even got Best of Utah 2011. Like we had some success. So it was fun. It was a fun business, but we ran into a bottleneck where we were hand building these coops because we'd give you everything that you needed to have your own backyard chickens, the coops, the water, the feeder. We would even give you the 1-year-old laying hens. So give you everything turnkey, right? But we ran into a bottleneck where we couldn't build the coops fast enough because we were doing them by hand. And keep creating, if I would have told myself that back then when I was 25, I would have gotten more creative on, okay, I think we have something here. If we stick with it, get creative, pivot, maybe we're not going to be the one that builds the coops and actually delivers them at your house. Now, if you go on Amazon right now, you could get thousands of different coops for $150 that they ship to your house, and then you assemble. So if I would have pivoted back then to something different, maybe it would have had a different outcome. Another company that I started back when I was 25 was called Gimme Sugar Catering, which was a mini donut catering company, and we focused on weddings. And we were successful there too because we got invited to be on it was the Cooking Channel in the US, Food Network in Canada, and it was called Donut Showdown. And my wife and her friend went on the show, competed on the show, didn't win, but it was amazing. We competed against Top Pot Donuts, like some big companies, and we focused on catering weddings. There's the Fear Factory downtown. It was the first year that they were open. We were the only vendor at the Fear Factory for that year, and so we had some good success. And if we were so the advice I'd give myself is just keep creating, keep pivoting, do something, like give it some more time or pivot and do something else, but with the same idea, because this was before all the cookie craze, like all the crumbles and all that kind of stuff came out. Cupcakes were popular, sprinkles, cupcakes, all that kind of stuff. But, man, you can see if I just gave it a little bit more and maybe pivoted and did something else with it or a different, avenue, maybe it could have been more successful. But both of those companies fizzled out.
I have one more question. There's a quote by a philosopher who he asked the question, why can't we remember the future? Which I love that question, because time is just this thing that we're living on, but I don't really know how much it exists. So what would 50-year-old Travis what advice would 50-year-old Travis, now that you're in the sabbatical, you're at this time in life, channel 50-year-old Travis, and what advice does he have for you?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say the advice that 50-year-old Travis would have for just under 40 Travis, which is me today, is ownership. Like, moving forward in my career now, ownership is what changes lives. Like, you can be an employee, you can make a good salary, you can make good money, make even $1 million a year, great money, right? But life-changing money is ownership and equity. And that's what I'm looking for right now.
Travis, this has been amazing. Thank you.
Thanks for coming to the podcast, Travis.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You've been watching Hello Grow, the world's #1 growth podcast. I'm Cortland Brady.
I'm Carlos Souza. If you've watched this video so far, it means that you like the content that we're putting out and the people we're interviewing.
We're putting together a community of business leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales leaders. You liking, subscribing, and sharing this content helps us reach those that are going on that journey.
If you want to be a part of this community, please subscribe, smash that like button, and turn on those notifications.